will be available dun sa ating Canvas page. I-upload ko to later. So kung kukuha naman tayo ng inverse Laplace transform, ang titingnan natin dito sa table is from the right column to the left. Okay. So, ang inverse Laplace transform ng A over S squared plus A squared is sin AT. Okay. So, how do we use the Laplace transform for solving initial value problems? So, I'm going to give a simple example first just to illustrate the procedure, and then we'll work on more complicated examples later. So, solving IVPs using the Laplace transform. So let's consider this example. Y prime minus 4y equals e raised to 4t. Y of 0 equals 0. So unang step for solving this equation is to apply the Laplace transform on both sides. Yeah. Now, since linear, so sabi natin last lecture, linear ang Laplace transform, pwede natin kunan ng Laplace transform yung equation natin term by term. Okay, so let's do that. First, I'm going to write the Laplace transform of y prime. Okay. So sa previous lectures natin, ang gamit natin ay f or g. But now, since we are solving actual equations, balik tayo dun sa usual na notation natin, which is y. Okay. But the principle, of course, is still the same. So, the Laplace transform of y prime. Okay. So, recall natin, Laplace transform ng first derivative. It's s times the Laplace transform minus f of 0. So, for y prime, we have s times the Laplace transform minus y of 0. And then minus 4. So, Laplace transform naman ng 4y. I'm just going to copy negative 4 since constant lang yan. So, by linearity, I just need to get the Laplace transform of y. And by our convention, the Laplace transform of y is big Y of s. Okay? Now, for the right-hand side, kunin natin yung Laplace transform ng e raised to 4t. And let's look at the table. So e raised to 4t is of the form e raised to 8t. And the Laplace transform of e raised to 8t is 1 over s minus a. Our a here is 4. So therefore, we have 1 over s minus 4 on the right side. And then let's plug in our initial value, y of 0 equals 0. So mangyayari, mawawala itong term na to. So ang matitira ay s y of s minus 4 y of s equals 1 over s minus 4. Okay. So that's step 1. Apply the Laplace transform. And then since we have initial values, and then lalabas yung mga initial values dun sa Laplace transform ng derivative, we need to plug in the initial values. So, balikan natin yung Laplace transform ng mga derivatives. So, for example, Laplace ng f double prime. So, lalabas dito yung f of 0 tsaka f prime of 0. And then f triple prime, we have f of 0, f prime of 0, f double prime of 0. So don't forget to plug in the initial values. So next, step 2 is to solve for y of s. So i-isolate lang natin yung y of s dun sa left side ng ating equation. So factor out ko muna itong s minus 4. Okay, so s minus 4, then y of s equals 1 over s minus 4. And to isolate y of s, I'll just divide both sides by s minus 4. So therefore, y of s is equal to 1 over s minus 4 quantity squared. Okay, so recall natin, Laplace ng y of t, we denoted that by y of s, capital letter Y. Okay. So hindi natin alam kung ano exactly yung y because we're still in the process of solving the equation. Now, suppose we already know the Laplace. So we don't know y of t, but at this point, we already know y of s, which is the Laplace transform of y of t. So to get y of t, we apply the inverse Laplace transform onto y of s. So that is step 3. So step 3, i-adjust ko lang yung mga sinulat ko para kasya sa page. So step 3, apply the inverse Laplace transform on both sides of the equation that you obtained in step 2. Okay. So inverse Laplace ng, so ito yung nakuha natin from step 2. Kukunin ko ng inverse Laplace on both sides. So inverse Laplace ng y of s equals inverse Laplace ng 1 over s minus 4 quantity squared. And inverse Laplace ng y of s is y of t. So now, kailangan natin yung inverse Laplace ng 1 over s minus 4. So dito na papasok yung table natin. So we're looking from right to left. So again, dito sa step 1, we're looking from left to right, since we are applying the Laplace transform. For the inverse Laplace transform, we're looking from right to left. So hanap tayo ng entry which looks like this. 1 over s minus 4 quantity squared. So let's scan the table and we will see that ito yon, ito yung kailangan nating entry. N factorial over s minus a raised to n plus 1. So swak yung numerator natin dito kasi 1 lang siya. If we set n to be 1, then we get 1 factorial, which is 1. And then we set a to be 4 kasi s minus a dito. And we have s minus 4. So a equals 4. And then n equals 1. Yung denominator dito sa table natin will become 1 over s minus 4 raised to 1 plus 1 or 2. So therefore, ito ngayon yung inverse Laplace na kailangan natin. So t raised to n where n equals 1. So t times e raised to at where a equals 4. So e raised to 4. Ito na ngayon yung solution sa initial value problem. So ito lang yung procedure for using IVPs using the Laplace transform. Apply the Laplace transform on both sides, solve for y of s, and then apply the inverse Laplace transform. Okay. Now, I started with a simple example, but usually for equations of higher order, you would need to decompose a rational expression in its partial fractions. Okay. So if you notice dito, oops, ba't ko binara? So ito, meron tayong rational function dito. So yung expression natin for y of s is always a rational function in s. Now, there will be cases na komplikadong rational function yung makukuha natin sa right-hand side and hindi natin siya mahahanap dito sa table na to. So if that is the case, kailangan nating i-decompose yung expression sa kanan, yung rational function in S, into its partial fractions. So review muna natin paano mag-decompose into partial fractions. We delete this. Okay. Partial fractions. So for partial fractions, before you even proceed, you need to make sure that the degree of your numerator, so meron kayong rational function in S, suppose your numerator is P, and your denominator is Q. So dapat yung degree ng numerator nyo less than the degree of the denominator. Kung equal or kung mas malaki yung degree ng numerator sa degree ng denominator, kailangan nyong i-perform itong division na to. So otherwise, perform the division. If you perform the division, you will get a remainder. So dun sa remainder nyo, the degree of the numerator will then be less than the degree of the denominator. And then dun kayo sa remainder, magpa-partial fractions. Okay. So suppose nakaset up na yung inyong rational expression, it already satisfies this. Now you need to factor out the denominator. It needs to be completely factored out. And by that, I mean, kailangan yung mga factors natin ay either linear, okay, or irreducible quadratic. Irreducible meaning hindi na factorable. Kasi meron tayong mga quadratic factors na factorable. So kung factorable ang ating quadratic factor, hindi siya papasok sa case 2. Dito siya sa case 1 papasok. So wala dapat, for example, factor of degree 3. So kung meron kayong expression of degree 3 dyan, then pwede ba siyang ma-factor into linear, a combination of linear or quadratic factors. Okay, so suppose meron tayong denominator. At this point, we're not really concerned with the numerator. So I'll just write it as a box. Suppose meron tayong linear factor na ax plus b. Naka-array siya sa n. Made-decompose siya ngayon into ax plus b. So that's the first denominator. And then ax plus b raised to 2 hanggang ax plus b raised to n. Now for linear factors, our numerators are constants. So tawagin natin a1, a2, a sub n. Or you can also have a, b, c, and so on. So kung meron tayong, kung ang exponent ng ating linear factor ay n, then we have n fractions for that particular factor. If we have other factors other than ax plus b, which are also linear, then they will also have their own fractions. What if we have an irreducible quadratic factor? So we have some numerator divided by ax squared plus bx plus c. So same procedure, we will have n fractions. And then, palaki ng palaki din yung exponent do sa ating denominator. I start with ax squared plus bx plus c, then ax squared plus bx plus c, quantity squared, hanggang ax squared plus bx plus c raised to n. The difference here, if we have quadratic factors or irreducible quadratic factors, is instead of a constant, we have a linear numerator. So a sub 1x plus b sub 1, a sub 2x plus b sub 2, hanggang a sub nx plus b sub n. And our job now is to find the values of these constants, a1, a2, up to an, or a1, b1, a2, b2, up to an, bn. Okay. So let's look at an example para ma-illustrate din natin kung paano mag-compute ng mga numerator sa partial fraction decomposition. So let's solve the equation y double prime plus 2y prime plus y equals 6. If you notice, this is a linear equation of order 2 with constant coefficients. Pero hindi siya homogeneous kasi hindi zero yung right-hand side natin. Kung zero yung right-hand side natin, then hindi na natin kailangan mag-Laplace transform. Kailangan lang nating gumamit ng characteristic polynomial, which is yung diniscuss natin dun sa ating previous lesson for linear equations. So next, we have y of 0 equals 5, and then y prime of 0 equals 10. Okay, so step 1 is we need to apply the Laplace transform on both sides of the equation. So apply natin. So Laplace transform ng y double prime plus 2y prime plus y equals the Laplace transform of 6. So again, here, the Laplace transform of y of t is y of s. And y of t is equal to the inverse Laplace of y of s. Yeah, anyway, notation lang yan. Okay. So, Laplace ng y double prime. So, dito siya papasok. Laplace ng second derivative. So, we have s squared times the Laplace transform minus s f of 0 minus f prime of 0. Susulat natin. So, we have s squared y of s minus s y of 0 minus y prime of 0. And then plus 2. And then sa loob, I will write the Laplace transform of y prime. Laplace transform of y prime is s y of s minus y of 0. And then third term, which is y, the Laplace transform of y is just y of s. So plus y of s equals, so nasa right side naman tayo, Laplace transform of 6. So for step 1, we're looking at the table from from the left column to the right column. Hanap tayo ng entry na that corresponds to this. So 6 is just a constant. Dito sa ating second row, we have the Laplace transform of c, which is c over s. So therefore, Laplace transform of 6 is 6 over s. Okay. I-plug in muna natin yung ating mga initial values before we proceed to step 2. Okay. I have s squared y of s minus s times y naught, y of 0, which is 5, so 5s, minus y prime of 0, which is 10, plus, so at the same time, I'm distributing 2 here. So 2s y of s minus 2 times y naught. So minus 10 plus y of s. Yung step 2 natin is to isolate y of s. But before we do that, kailangan muna natin i-transpose yung mga terms not containing y of s. So ito yun, negative 5s minus 10 minus 10. So that's 6 over s. Transpose natin sa kanan itong negative 5s minus 10 minus 10. That will become 5s plus 20. Ang goal natin is magkaroon ng rational function in s sa kanan. So kailangan nating i-combine itong expression na to into a single fraction. So combining this into one fraction, I will get 6 plus 5s squared plus 20s. Okay. So now, on the left side, I'm going to collect the coefficients of y of s. So those are s squared, 2s, and 1. So I have s squared plus 2s plus 1 quantity y of s. Yeah. Now s squared plus 2s plus 1 factors into s plus 1 quantity squared. Yan. So pwede na nating i-isolate yung y of s. I'll just divide both sides by s plus 1 quantity squared. So y of s therefore is equal to, in the denominator, I have s times s plus 1 quantity squared. Now I might as well rearrange the numerator into its in such a way that the powers of s are decreasing para medyo maganda yung itsura niya. So 5s squared plus 20s plus 6. So now we get to the partial fractions. So kukopihin ko muna itong rational function ko. Okay. And I will compute the partial fractions on a different page. Okay. Now check muna natin yung degree. Dapat yung degree ng numerator ay less than the degree of the denominator. So check. The degree of the numerator is 2. The degree of the denominator is, so if you expand the denominator, you will get 3. You will get s cubed. So mas maliit yung degree ng numerator kaysa denominator. So we can now proceed. Also, completely factored out na yung ating denominator. We have two factors, s and s plus 1. Yung s, meron siyang exponent na 1. So it will only correspond to one fraction in the decomposition. Ito namang s plus 1, ang exponent niya ay 2. So it will correspond to two fractions in the decomposition. One for s plus 1 and one for s plus 1 quantity squared. Now, parehong linear ang s tsaka s plus 1. So therefore, yung numerator natin ay constants lang. Tawagin natin a, b, and c. So kailangan nating malaman kung ano yung values ng a, b, and c. So una muna, kailangan kong i-clear out yung mga denominators natin para meron lang akong polynomial on both sides of my equation. So I will multiply both sides by s times s plus 1 quantity squared. So, ang mangyayari dun sa kaliwa, magiging lang siyang 5s squared plus 20s plus 6. So again, I multiplied by this entire thing, the denominator itself. So yung kaliwa natin, yung right-hand side rather, will now become a times s plus 1 quantity squared plus b times s plus 1 quantity squared, or s plus 1 lang, plus C times S. So, ayan. Now, how do we find the values of A, B, and C? So, meron tayong two techniques. One technique is to compare the coefficients. And comparing the coefficients, okay, so comparing the coefficients. This is appropriate if your linear factors or one of your linear factors have has an exponent greater than 1. Okay. Kung puro 1 lang yung exponent ng mga linear factors natin, we will have an easier technique. But for now, since we have a linear factor na 2 yung exponent, so malaki sa 1, then we need to compare the coefficients. Okay. So before we start comparing the coefficients, kailangan fully expanded itong ating right-hand side. So let me expand the right-hand side. So again, I'm doing this because we have a linear factor with exponent 2. Kung puro 1 lang yung exponent ng mga linear factors natin, hindi natin kailangan i-expand dun sa other method. So for the other method, I will illustrate that in the next example. Okay. So itong s plus 1 quantity squared, it will become s squared plus 2s plus 1. So we have as squared plus 2as plus a. And then ito namang bs times s plus 1, it will become bs squared plus bs. And then plus cs. Yeah. So let's compare the coefficients. I'm going to start with the coefficients of s squared. So coefficients of s squared. Now on the left side, the coefficient of s squared is 5. Equate natin siya sa coefficient ng s squared dun sa kanan. And sa kanan, we have a and b. Ayan. So we have a plus b. So 5 equals a plus b. So next, coefficients of s. On the left side, I have 20. On the right side, I have 2a and b. So 2a and c rather. Ayun, c pa. So 2a plus b plus c. So 2a plus b plus c. And then finally, the constant term, which is technically the coefficient of s raised to 0. So constant term. On the left side, the constant term is 6. And on the right side, the only constant term is a. So immediately we have the values of a value of a, which is 6. And then we can use that to find the value of b. So if a is 6, we have b equals 5 minus a. So we have b equals 5 minus 6. So therefore, b equals negative 1. And then for c, from the second equation implies that c is equal to 20 minus 2a minus b. So we have 20 minus twice of 6, so 12, 20 minus 12, minus negative 1, so that's equal to 9. So we have a equals 6, b equals negative 1, and c equals 9. So pwede ko na ngayong isulat yung aking partial fraction decomposition. So take note, itong expression na to equal siya equal siya dito. And this is equal to y of s. So therefore, y of s is equal to a over s. So that's 6 over s. Minus 1 over s plus 1 plus c, which is 9. So plus 9s plus 1 quantity squared. So we now have y of s. And then we can now take the Laplace or inverse Laplace of both sides. Adjust ko na lang yung spacing. Ayan. So inverse Laplace ng y of s equals the inverse Laplace of this partial fraction decomposition. So inverse Laplace of y of s is y of t. Now, ang inverse Laplace ay linear din. So pwede natin isa-isain itong tatlong fractions na to. Okay. And then we can actually ignore the constants. Okay. So after ignoring the constants or after copying the constants, you can just get the Laplace transform of the remaining part of your expression. So for the first term, which is 6 over s, inalis ko na yung 6. Okay? It's just a constant. So ang matitira ay 1 over s. And now I'm going to look at the inverse Laplace of 1 over s. So for the inverse Laplace, I'm looking at my table from right to left. And ang papasok na entry is ito. Laplace of c over s is c. Okay. So therefore, Laplace of 1 over s is just 1. Or equivalently, inverse Laplace of 1 over s is 1. Or equivalently, the inverse Laplace of 6 over s is 6. So okay na siya. So 6. 6 lang yan. Minus inverse Laplace of s of 1 over s plus 1. Okay. So let's look at our table. Hanap tayo ng s minus or plus some constant. Okay. And ito yung makikita natin. 1 over s minus a. The inverse Laplace of s minus a is e raised to at. Meron tayong s plus 1. So we need to take a to be negative 1. So therefore, the Laplace of 1 over s plus 1 is e raised to negative 1 times t. Or e raised to negative t. So next, copying ko yung 9. And now I am left with 1 over s plus 1 quantity squared. So, ano tayo ng entry on our table for 1 over s plus or minus something quantity squared. So actually, nagamit na natin yung entry na yan doon sa previous example. Ito yon. And factorial over s minus a raised to n plus 1. The inverse Laplace is t raised to n e raised to 8. Our n here is 1 and our a is negative 1. So, ang inverse Laplace ng 1 over s plus 1 quantity squared is t raised to 1 e raised to negative 1t or negative t. Yeah. So, ito na ngayon yung solution dun sa ating initial value problem. Okay. Yeah, so let's have another example. Now, as you can see, degree 2 pa lang itong tinatrabaho natin. If we are working on equations of higher order, expectedly, mas malaki ngayon yung exponents ng s na makikita natin dito sa ating rational function. You will have higher powers of s there. And ang consequence niyan is when we get to the partial fraction decomposition, hindi na ngayon siya magiging kasing dali. So for our examples and for our computations, we will limit ourselves to expressions of or equations of order 2. So my next example will be of order 2. So y double prime minus 6y prime plus 5y equals 3 e raised to 2t. Y of 0 equals 2. Y prime of 0 equals 3. Okay. So this is not a homogeneous equation. Hindi 0 yung right-hand side ng ating equation. So hindi natin pwede gamitin yung characteristic polynomial to solve for this equation. So let's apply the Laplace transform. So Laplace transform ng y double prime minus 6y prime plus 5y equals Laplace transform ng 3 e raised to 2t. Okay. So at this point, dapat familiar na tayo sa Laplace ng second derivative. It's s squared y of s minus s y of 0 minus y prime of 0. Okay. Medyo malakas yung ulan ngayon dito sa amin. So baka mawala yung aking connection. Yeah. Okay, so next I have negative 6 times the Laplace of y prime. So y prime, the Laplace of y prime is s y of s minus y of 0 plus 5. So nasa third term na tayo. 5 and then the Laplace of y, which is y of s. And that is equal to 3 times the Laplace of e raised to 2t. So, tingin tayo sa ating table. Hanap tayo ng entry for e raised to something. E raised to 80, for example. And ito yon. The Laplace of e raised to 80 is 1 over s minus a. Therefore, the Laplace of e raised to 2t is s minus 2. Plug in natin yung ating initial values. Y of 0 is equal to 2. So I have negative 2s minus y prime of 0, which is 3, minus 6s, y of s, plus 6 times y of 0, which is 12. So plus 12 plus 5 y of s equals 3 over s minus 2. Ngayon, bago ko i-isolate yung y of s, I will transpose everything not containing y of s. Not containing y of s. So yun ay negative 2s, negative 3, tsaka positive 12. So I have 3s minus 2 plus 2s minus 9. Yan. And then, I'm going to collect the coefficients of y of s. And those are s squared minus 6s plus 1 times y of s. Okay. Now again, yung right-hand side natin dapat iisang fraction lang. So I'm going to combine this into one fraction. So I will have s minus 2 in the denominator. In the numerator, I will have 3 plus 2s minus 9 times s minus 2. Ayan. Now, Pwede ko nang i-divide yung both sides by s squared minus 6s plus 1, but I might as well factor out s squared minus 6s plus 1 first. So s squared minus 6s plus 1 factors into s minus 1 times s minus 5. So therefore, y of s equals 3 plus 2s minus 9 times s minus 2 over s minus 2 times s minus 1 times s minus 5. Okay, so ito na ngayon yung expression na kukunan natin ng partial fraction decomposition. Now, check muna natin yung degree. Without actually expanding the numerator and the denominator, yeah, 5. 5 dapat. Ito ay 5. Nawala yung 5 dito. Yeah, so thank you for that. Okay, so without actually expanding, check muna natin yung degree ng ating numerator at denominator. Degree of the numerator is 2. Degree of the denominator is 3. So mas maliit, so we can now proceed with the partial fractions. Okay, I'm gonna do that with the on the next page. Since hindi nakasya dito. Okay. So ito na yung other technique for solving the coefficients. Meron tayong tatlong linear factors na puro 1 lang yung exponent. So actually mas madali ito. So makikita niyo. So since 1 lang yung mga exponents sila, we will just have one fraction for each of them. So s minus 2, s minus 1, s minus 5. Tawagin natin A, B, and C yung numerators. And then let's multiply both sides by s minus 2, s minus 1, s minus 5. So ang matitira ay 3 plus 2s minus 9, s minus 2 equals A times s minus 1, s minus 5 plus B, s minus 2, s minus 5 plus C, s minus 2, s minus 1. Okay. So for this technique, I'm just going to replace s by some value that will make the denominator in the original expression 0. Okay. So ito yung denominator sa original expression natin. And the values of s that will make the denominator 0 are 2, 1, and 5. So I'll start with 2. If s equals 2, hey, if s equals 2, that means s minus 2 is equal to 0. So lahat ng mga terms dito containing s minus 2, magiging 0 sila lahat. So dito sa left-hand side, itong s minus 2 na to, magiging 0 siya. So this entire term will become 0. So yung nasa kaliwa ko ngayon, 3 na lang. Now for the right-hand side, again, since s minus 2 equals 0, everything containing s minus 2, so ito, contains s minus 2. Magiging 0 yan. Ito rin, it contains s minus 2. It will become 0. So ang matitira dito ay yung term containing a. So only the term containing a remains. So I have a, and then when s equals 2 here, I will have negative 3 in front of a. And therefore, I have a equals negative 1. So next, I'm going to set S to be equal to 1. Okay, so on the left side, I will have 3 plus -7 times -1. So that's 10. Okay, now since S equals 1, that also implies that S minus 1 equals 0. So lahat ng mga expressions containing S minus 1, such as this and this, they will become 0 as well. So ang matitira ngayon ay itong term containing B. So for the term containing B, if S equals 1, I will have B times -1 times -4. So I have 4B. So B equals 10 over 4 or 5 over 2. And then finally, if X equals 5, okay, we will have 3 plus 3. So 6 dun sa left side. Tama ba? Yeah. Since S equals 5, S minus 5 equals 0. So everything on the right side containing S minus 5 will become 0. So yung first two terms. So therefore, yung C lang yung matitira. Okay, so we have C and then times S minus 2, S minus 1. So that will be 12. So therefore, C equals 1/2. Yeah. So sulat na natin yung ating partial fraction decomposition. I have y of s equals -1 over s minus 2 or negative ng 1 over s minus 2 plus 5 over 2 over s minus 1 plus 1/2 over s minus 5. And then, kuna natin ang inverse Laplace transform yung both sides. And for y of s, the inverse Laplace of y of s is by definition y of t. Ngayon, kailangan nating tingnan yung table natin na if you notice, yung magkakamukha ng form yung ating partial fraction decomposition. It's always some constant over s minus another constant. So tingnan natin yung entry on the Laplace on the table. So for inverse Laplace transform, I'm going from right to left on the table. So magkakamukha lang yung denominator natin is minus some constant. Okay. And yung pasok na entry dito sa ating table is ito. Inverse Laplace of 1 over s minus a is e raised to 8. Ngayon, kukopihin ko na lang yung mga numerator natin. So, -1, inverse Laplace of 1 over s minus 2 is e raised to 2t plus 5 over 2. Inverse Laplace of 1 over s minus 1 is e raised to t plus 1/2. Inverse Laplace ng 1 over s minus 5 is e raised to 5. Okay, 1/2 ito dapat. So 1/2 e raised to 5. So ito na ngayon yung ating solution. So you might be wondering, what if yung initial value natin ay hindi 0? Hindi siya at t equals 0. Bawa, y of 1 equals 2, y prime of 1 equals 3. So pwede pa rin natin gamitin yung Laplace transform, but I will be including that into an optional lesson. So I will be posting. So actually, hindi, although this is technically our last lecture, I will continue to upload lessons, optional lessons for those who are interested um, in learning the other techniques. Okay. Kasi goal ko rin actually na magkaroon ng compilation ng mga recorded video lectures for the other topics that involve solving differential equation. So I will be posting them into Canvas. But every every lesson that I will be posting, which does not cover what we discussed, will be optional. So hintayin nyo na lang yung mga succeeding lessons and optional resources for those who are interested. But basically, hanggang dito lang yung ika-cover ng ating second exam. Okay, so meron bang tanong? Any questions? Any concerns? Hopefully, one group from this class will participate in the science camp. If not the science camp, um, with other activities for DPSM week.
Sir,
Yes.
may tentative date na po ba sa finals or wala pa rin?
Wala pa. Ang meron lang is yung final exam week. Okay.
Okay, thank you po, sir.
I think yung college yung nag-schedule ng final exam. So hintayin na lang natin. Hintayin ko na lang kung ano yung announcement from the college. Other concerns? Okay. So kung wala na, so that ends our lesson for the semester, and see you around, especially during the PSM week. Okay. So bye for now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you po.